This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Hello, college football fans, and welcome to the Primetime Podcast. My name is Ricky Widmer, and as always, I'm joined by the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And Brandon, we are back this week coming at you with not basketball, no college basketball. I petitioned for it. I said, hey, Brandon, at the end, can we fit maybe like 5 minutes of college basketball at the end?
Brandon
shot me down.
said absolutely not.
No, Brandon said it is football season, Ricky. We will save basketball for 2016. And boy, do we have a jam-packed show for you guys in this one. We're talking college football playoffs. And I had an interesting kind of idea for what we do in this podcast, Brandon. We take the favorites. So as of right now, the teams that would make the playoffs, we've got Clemson's a front runner. Oklahoma State would be the outright champion in the Big 12. Ohio State in the Big 10. Notre Dame. Then you have Alabama in the SEC because, let's be honest, a 2-win team in the Pac-12, Utah or Stanford right now, they're not going to make the playoff even if they win the Pac-12. We will see whoever wins that conference in the Rose Bowl. But we take these front runners for the playoffs and we kind of look at their villains and kind of talk about who can knock these teams off. Because when you look at every single conference, every single favorite has a joker. They have that villain that's like, man, this team could ruin their year.
Yeah, every team's got that. Every team's got that, especially at this point. It's really getting to the point where you've got those teams that are playing spoiler. I mean, big time. Like, I mean, it would be way out there. But I know I was watching the Alabama game this past weekend, and obviously they're playing Mississippi State. But then I'm seeing who they're playing this next weekend, Charleston Southern. And I'm going, why in the hell are they playing Charleston Southern? They're going to walk all over them. It's not even a competition. That's the type of game that people need to watch out for.
Well, they usually
Alabama's going to roll them, but it's teams like that would try and play spoiler.
Alabama and Auburn always have, like, if you look at Auburn, they're playing Idaho in their next game. They usually, yeah, good one, Brandon. But they usually, Auburn and Alabama, play that cupcake team.
I hate that.
Before they play the Iron Bowl.
I hate that.
Well, okay, you want to come full force into the Iron Bowl. Would you rather have Alabama play Charleston Southern at the beginning of the year or right before the Iron Bowl? To make sure that nothing upsetty is going to happen before the Iron Bowl.
I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, if they play them at the beginning of the year, it gets them out of the way. If they play a tough team towards the end, it shows, they're truly tough. I mean, mentally, physically, and stuff like that. So you can take it both ways. And trust me, I who am undoubtedly an Alabama fan.
Alabama and Notre Dame are your teams. You have made that known.
I think so. I think that, though, I'm happy that they play them, but at the same time, I'm like, that's not even going to be a fun game to watch. Why would I watch it?
We're talking about the Charleston game, not the Iron Bowl.
No, not the Iron Bowl.
Because, I mean, you brought up Alabama, so we'll kind of start with them where they've got, to me, the game I'm looking forward to is the one we are most likely going to see in the SEC title game. Them, Florida. Who wins, who goes to the playoff, because that's how it's going to be. Florida's already locked up their seat in Atlanta to play for the SEC throne. However, Alabama can't be looking at them because what do they have in 2 weeks, Brandon?
They've got Auburn.
And I know Auburn, you look at them, 5-5 team, 2-5 in the conference, but anything can happen when the Tigers and the Crimson Tide go to play.
And Auburn's actually played some decent games this year. You look at the game against Texas A&M. They beat them there in a game that a lot of people thought A&M would go in there and just slide right in, slide right out.
Georgia was a one-score game. Ole Miss was a one-score game. Arkansas was a one-score game. Mississippi State was a one-score game. The only team that beat them by more than one score was at LSU.
And really quickly, you brought up a team a couple moments ago, Arkansas.
Hey, man,
How about them?
They've been on a roll. I wish that Alabama was playing Arkansas this weekend. Have to beat a team that's upset two big powers because they beat Ole Miss, then they beat LSU. This is a team that, I mean, you look at them when they played Alabama close. They played Texas A&M close, only lost by a touchdown there. Played Toledo close earlier in the year. If we didn't have a Bielema kind of mess up there, getting too cocky in Toledo, the Toledo Rockets would have never been ranked this season because that was week 2 of the college football playoff season. Arkansas, to me, is a team that is on the rise. And when I say that, next year could be a year we're talking about them in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think we definitely could see them. I mean, they have made a case for themselves moving forward, and they're definitely going to be a team that I think a lot of people will be watching and looking at in the offseason. And I think that's another place to look at on the recruits that they bring in. You know, because of how well they've performed this year, will more people possibly want to go to Arkansas, a team that, you know, a couple of years back, they were on the map, then they were off the map,
and then
they're positioning themselves into a spot to get back on the map again.
And they've been the laughingstock of the SEC West for how many years now? A few. Now they're 4-2 in the conference, 6-4 overall. They're going to a bowl game. But let's get back to the meat and potatoes of this conversation, Brandon. Alabama, they're the top dog. They win the SEC, and it is safe to say they are in the college football playoff. Let's look at villain number 1 on the map for them. Iron Bowl opponent, Auburn. The game is going to be played at Auburn, a place where, you know, long field goals have a trend of being ran back for touchdowns. Do you see in Alabama's future an upset? And I'm referring to the kickback from a few years ago.
Ricky, I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, of
Just
course,
kidding.
Of course,
that's a complete joke.
Of course, a Crimson Tide fan doesn't.
You know, in all honesty, being an Alabama fan, though, I gotta say that was pretty cool. I mean, just on the other side,
and that sent Auburn to the national title game.
Yeah.
Lost to Jameis Winston, but it sent them.
Which I'm sure you were ecstatic about.
I was not. I was very upset at that game. That was the last BCS championship game, I believe, right?
Yeah.
That was the one right before the college football playoff was adopted. But I don't know about you, Brandon. I look at this Iron Bowl game, Alabama, and I know that Nick Saban knows this, and I don't have to text Nick and tell him that.
Not that you'd be able to.
You got to make sure that this happens, but Alabama can't overlook Auburn. They've got to be ready to play that Iron Bowl game. They can't be overlooking them and saying, man, we want to get a piece of that Florida team.
Well, how about this? You know, this is an Auburn team, again, we talked about it just a little bit ago. They've been a team that's been up and down this season. They know that. We know that. Alabama knows that. But I think at the same time, when you're a coach, you're not going in looking how they've done up and throughout the season, up and down throughout the season. You look at what they can do, what they've done to you in the past, and you know that they're a talented football team, and that's exactly what Auburn is. They're a talented football team, and they're well coached by Gus Malzahn, who I have a lot of respect for. And I think that at the end of the day, Alabama has got to come, and they've got to bring the A game. There can be no let-up, because you let up just a little bit, and Auburn's going to take advantage of that. And Auburn will look to take advantage of that against Alabama, because at the end of the day, with how Auburn has been this year, they don't have much to play for. That is going to be, I think, their bowl game. You know, I think that is their big game towards the end of the season. I mean, that is it for them.
Well, and I mean, everybody, the Iron Bowl is the one game I love, Brandon, because it's the game where, I mean, I turn on Paul Feinbaum for like the only time in the entire season. I will actually look to find his radio show just because I want to hear what Alabama fans and Auburn fans are saying that week. Because they call in. They call into his show and just argue with each other. And
sounds fun.
Some of it is just radio gold from the stupid shit that they say. But let's say that for the sake of argument, Alabama gets past Auburn. If they get past that Auburn team, who do they have waiting for them? A team that in Florida, win or lose their next two, they're playing in Atlanta for the SEC title game. Florida has Florida Atlantic and then at home against, right now, number 16, Florida State, before the rankings come out in a little under an hour from when we're recording this podcast. But no matter what, Florida is going to be that team that if they win their next two, they're saying, the coach is saying, hey guys, we got to win this game, because if we win this game, we can get into the college football playoff. Or if they lose, let's say, to Florida State, because come on, they're not going to lose to Florida Atlantic, then they're saying, hey, let's ruin their season. Let's win the SEC, go to a New Year's Six bowl, and ruin Alabama's season. Let's ruin their title chances right here, right now. Because if Alabama loses that game, no playoff. No playoff for a 2-win team. They're a 2-loss team.
Who's it bigger for? Is it bigger for Florida or is it bigger for Alabama?
Bigger for Florida. And the reason why I say that is, think about Florida last season. A year ago, the Florida team that we saw was god-awful. It was god-awful.
Well, they couldn't win anything.
Well, they finished 7-5. So, Ricky, you're like, Ricky, how are they god-awful? Well,
no, I think their fans would agree with you.
They lost 42-21 against Alabama last year in Montgomery. Then they lose to LSU by 3. Homecoming last year against Missouri, 42-13. Everyone's calling for Muschamp's head. Then they win 2 and then lose in overtime to South Carolina before losing to Florida State and Jameis Winston in Tallahassee. They get rid of Muschamp. Muschamp goes over. He's going to be at the Auburn game because he's their defensive coordinator. And now in year 1, without Muschamp, 1 loss. 1 loss that they should have won against Leonard Fournette and that LSU team. 1 loss. And it was because Leonard Fournette scored 1 touchdown in the fourth quarter. That's why they lost.
Yeah, this Florida team has been a different, revived, rejuvenated team. We've seen it all season. They've played well. They've done a good job. I think that they are going to be a dangerous team going down the stretch, and that's for anybody. I think that Florida State, if they, have, they can't have a high hope of getting in, but I think that that's going to be a big test for Florida State. And if Florida State wins that game, maybe we see a little bit of a shakeup. But I don't think they do. I think Florida ends up winning that one, and then I think we're going to see a really good game against Alabama and Florida come a couple of weeks.
I hope we see a good one. I hope we see a good one between Florida and Alabama. Because like I said, Florida's already in because they're playing Florida Atlantic and Florida State. There's no way they're not going to be in that title game. They've already punched their ticket.
But I've got a really quick question before go off on the Ricky Widmer agenda. How do you stop Derrick Henry, who has been getting better and better by the weeks? And it seems like he's had a lot of great games, but he broke out big time against LSU. How do you stop him? How do you stop him? The guy who now is, after all this time, we thought it was going to be Leonard Fournette. Right now, it looks like Henry's going to be the Heisman this season. As of right now.
How do you stop him?
How do you stop him?
Do what Ohio State did last year. Zeke Elliott. You have a running back.
I don't think Ezekiel Elliott stopped him.
You put a performance like Zeke Elliott in front of them. That's the only way you're stopping Henry, is find a running back to go toe-to-toe with him.
So basically you're saying
game. Big plays.
Cares
big
about defense. You're not going to stop him.
Well,
you're probably not going to limit him.
Look at the Alabama game from last year. I know Derrick Henry wasn't the Derrick Henry of last year, but when Zeke had that huge run for a touchdown, kind of sucked all the air out of that stadium, and the momentum went right into Ohio State's hands, and they held on to it. Florida's just got to do that. When Alabama starts chipping away, giving it off to Henry, getting some momentum, even if they score, you need to have that big play ability to say, hey, you know what? Boom, score. It could be a long drive. It could be a big play. You have to control the momentum. You can't let Alabama take the momentum and hold on to it, because then they just keep giving the ball to Henry, and that momentum kind of stockpiles.
And at the end of the day, a final question from me with Alabama. Do you have faith in Jake Coker? And do you have faith in Jake Coker to play well for them here down the stretch and be able to be that quarterback that could lead them to multiple wins?
I don't know. I think that's the best answer I can give you. I don't know. Are we going to see a Jake Coker that we've seen the last few games? We're doing enough, getting the win. Like, looking at his last games, before this last one against Mississippi State, we had Texas A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. Dude didn't have a touchdown. Dude hadn't thrown a single touchdown. However, to counteract that, when he was throwing 0 touchdowns in those 3 games, he only threw 1 INT. Or are we going to see the Coker that we saw against Ole Miss, where, he threw 3 touchdowns, but he had 2 INTs as well? Which Coker are we going to see? And against a Florida team that Alabama hasn't seen yet this season, all I'm going to say right now, because we got 2 weeks until that game, it's going to be a good one. I can't pick a winner yet. I can't. We gotta wait 2 weeks before I go ahead.
Ricky, the guy who is picking winners months out, weeks away, can't pick the winner. Now that's saying something.
It's gonna be a great game. But let's move. We were talking about Florida State. Let's move to the ACC.
Okay.
Florida State, whether they win or lose against Florida or what they do, probably not going to go to. They've got 2 non-conference games coming against Chattanooga and Florida.
And they've already got 2 losses.
They're not going anywhere. Clemson, they only have 1 ACC game left against Wake Forest. Even if they lose that game, Clemson has locked up the Atlantic and is going to the ACC title game. On the other side of things, their foe in that game most likely will be North Carolina. If North Carolina wins this week on the road against Virginia Tech, or they lose this week and win next week at NC State, they go to the ACC title game. And here's the interesting thing about this particular conference situation. Clemson, if they win out, they're going to be in the top 4, a playoff team. Win the ACC, you're in. That's what we're going to be talking about. North Carolina has an interesting situation, though. Win your next 2, then you're in the discussion for, okay, we can beat Clemson and get into the college football playoff as a 1-loss team. Or they lose one of these next 2, go 1-1, and then they're saying, we'll beat Clemson, we'll get a New Year's Six bowl, and ruin Clemson's season. That's the situation in front of them. The third situation for the Tar Heels, and is the worst situation, is lose 2 of them and possibly lose a tiebreaker to Pitt. But I don't see that happening because North Carolina beat Pitt. So no matter what, North Carolina, it will most likely be our ACC Coastal team playing Clemson. It's just, are you going to play them as a chance to go to the playoffs or as spoiler to go to a New Year's Six game?
Now, Ricky, honestly, I feel like the role is reversed here a little bit because you're usually the one asking me the questions, but, I just have obviously better questions tonight. So my question here right now.
Okay, shoot.
North Carolina, they're playing on the road at Virginia Tech this weekend. Virginia Tech played at least pretty tough against Ohio State in week 1. Do you see any issues in this ball game? North Carolina traveling on the road, Virginia Tech. Do we see possible upset in the air?
Yes.
Do you feel it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason why is this is senior night for Virginia Tech. However, It's not night because it's 11
day.
It's
a senior morning.
Senior day,
we get it.
But more importantly, this is the last time that Frank Beamer is going to coach a game at Virginia Tech. This is the last time that these group of young men are going to walk out for the juniors and sophomores and freshmen. The seniors are gone. But these are the last time that this group of guys is going to do all the pregame rituals, walk onto the field with Frank Beamer. And man, is this Virginia Tech team going to want... One of the scariest things in football is the win it for the Gipper mentality. Look at this past Thursday night in the NFL. Look what the Bills were able to do to the Jets because they had that win it for the Gipper mentality. We got to win this one for Rex. Rex is coming home. We got to win this one for Rex. Am I saying Virginia Tech gets the win? Probably not, because what I really want to see is North Carolina win out and then beat Clemson in the title game. But if Clemson won, I wouldn't be totally upset because I don't hate Clemson, but I just like the underdog with North Carolina in this case.
I was going to say, because I know you don't love North Carolina. So.
No, but in football, it's kind of a toss of the coin. It's more basketball where, I don't know. I think I hate the Dukies more than I hate North Carolina, though. So, I don't know. This one,
we're going to have a discussion for sure when basketball starts up, because I've got an issue with that.
Maybe we will talk basketball tonight. But here's the thing with Virginia Tech. Win it for the Gipper mentality with Frank Beamer coaching his last game at home at Virginia Tech. That's the only reason why I see a possible upset.
Yeah, I could also see that too. I just know that Virginia Tech, hasn't been that bad. They did play pretty tough against Ohio State, at least for a half, in the first game of the season. And I mean, people would say Ohio State, they're overrated, they are overranked, they're this and they're that, but it still was Ohio State, the team that was number one, and I think would still be number one if we were doing just rankings, but not playoff rankings. I think that that says something. Again, Virginia Tech, they're even, they're 5-5, they're 3-3 in their conference, they're nothing special. They've been average this season, but I think that coming into this game, there's so many teams, especially down this stretch at this point in the season, so late in the season. It is, for some teams, it's do or die. It's make your move now or go home. Pack it in because you're going home. Virginia Tech is a possible team that could do that this weekend at home to a North Carolina team that has been very good this season at 9-1, 6-0 within their conference. But I look for Virginia Tech to, if not get the win, play one hell of a game.
Virginia Tech's going to play one hell of a game. However, if they don't win this week against North Carolina, I feel like they get a win next week against Virginia. They're going to go bowling this season, let's be honest. They're not going to send Coach Beamer out without a bowl game. And right now, if you guys want to see, it's on my Twitter account. I retweeted the tweet that SportsCenter had. You can see the patch that Virginia Tech is going to wear with their blackout uniforms this weekend for Coach Beamer. It's got Beamer on it with the fist up doing an interview, and it says 1987 to 2015 has signature on it.
That's cool.
And it's going to be right over their left shoulder. So they're going to be pumped for Coach Beamer. But let's talk about the real question here, Brandon.
Oh, the real question. I'm sorry for the fake one.
North Carolina and Clemson, they meet in the ACC title game. Who are you putting your money on?
North Carolina and Clemson, and who am I putting my money on?
You hate North Carolina, so you're going to go Clemson, aren't you?
I don't hate North Carolina. You're actually wrong on that.
You hate Duke?
I can't stand Duke.
I thought you were a Dookie.
No. I have
Dookie.
sense.
Okay,
I have sense.
Sorry. I thought you were a
On the
Dookie.
other part of Carolina, they're all within 25 miles away or something like that anyways. But no, North Carolina fan for sure, especially basketball. But that's really tough. I'm not going to lie to you. That's really a tough question. Both teams, a lot of talent. I think that when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers. That's who I would put my money on.
And the reason why I said with this conference, I don't care who wins it with North Carolina or Clemson, because North Carolina's the underdog. I usually cheer for the underdog. However, Clemson's been the underdog for the past 2 seasons, almost beating Jameis Winston, but couldn't beat Jameis Winston, and have been second fiddle to Florida State and Jameis Winston the past 2 years. So to see them get a win, go to the college football playoff, would probably be, it'd be really good just to see, because of a team that for the past 2 years have had to play second fiddle. I'm going to give you the option. Do you want to go to the Big Ten next, the Independent, or do you want to go to the Big 12? What do you want to talk about next?
Let's go to the cheese stands alone. Independent.
The Independent. Notre Dame. And the reason why we're talking about them is they find themselves in the college football playoff discussion yet again. However, 2 things stand in front of this cheese that is standing alone. The first one, a date Saturday after Thanksgiving, the 28th in Stanford. If they lose that game, obviously they're not going to be a playoff team anymore. The second thing that stands in their way, let's say for the moment, we have Clemson wins, Alabama wins. This is their title games. They would obviously be in the playoff. Either Iowa or Ohio State, whoever wins the Big Ten, is going to be in the playoff. Here's my question to you. If either Oklahoma State or Oklahoma outright champion in the Big 12, can they have enough to get in ahead of Notre Dame? Or let's say Florida becomes the SEC champion and North Carolina becomes the ACC champion, do you see it where Notre Dame gets knocked out because they don't have that conference title next to their name?
No, because at the end of the day, in the Big 12, do they really have a conference title next to their name? That's the thing.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, they would have nothing. They would still be on an even playing field.
This is what I'm saying, because one of the criteria for the college football committee has said they take into consideration conference championships. And that's why I said if Oklahoma or Oklahoma State can be outright champions, like if they win at the top and they're the only one, no one's tied with them, that's an outright champion. If there's tied and we have co-champions, throw the Big 12 out the window.
Well, Notre Dame's going to be the outright champion of the Independent.
But that's not a conference.
Doesn't matter.
It does, though, because the
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because if...
How can you say it doesn't matter?
Because Big 12, if they don't have to... At the end of the day, they don't have a conference championship game.
No, but it doesn't matter. About, at this point, I'm not saying it's about the game. It's about if, let's say, Oklahoma State goes undefeated. They are even though there's no championship game, they are the outright champion of the Big 12. They're the only ones.
Yeah, same with Notre Dame.
So that puts them ahead of Notre Dame.
No.
Because Notre Dame doesn't have a conference championship.
I just won't agree with you. I just can't agree with you on that.
I just don't get, that's the big thing with me and Notre Dame. Notre Dame, to me, has to go, they have to go undefeated to make the playoff. And I feel like, part of me feels like, well, that's kind of getting the raw end of the stick there.
They don't have to go undefeated to make the playoffs, because even if they were in a conference, if people put them in the ACC conference, Clemson's in the ACC conference. They lost to Clemson, but
they're
just
not a
by
part
2.
of the conference.
I'm just saying that if that's the conference that they're playing tough teams. They played, well, people would say they're not tough anymore, and they're probably not, but they played Georgia Tech at the beginning of the season when they were ranked at 14. They won 30-22. They played Clemson. They played in a heck of a storm. They lost by just 2. They played USC, beat them. They played a close game against Temple, beat them. Beat Pitt, blew out Wake Forest. They're going to beat Boston College, and they're going to probably beat Stanford on the road at Stanford. So they've played teams. So we can't knock them for that. They're a good team. They don't need to go undefeated. I put them ahead of the teams in the Big 12, who I don't think look that great when it comes down to it, putting them against really good talent, or even if you put them against Iowa State, shit talent. So I think that Notre Dame really can't be knocked a whole lot when it comes down to this point, that they're not in a conference. They're still playing games. It's not like they're playing cupcake after cupcake after cupcake and, blowing them out. They've played some good games. They've played some close games. They've been competitive. I don't see the problem.
And why I bring this up is because it is on the selection committee and the playoff committee's website that this is one of the things that we take into consideration.
But don't you think they take into consideration that Notre Dame is not in one? And they see that and they go, okay, well, they're not in one. We can't knock them. They're not in one.
I'm just saying, do you put because to me, let's say ranking stand right now. Clemson winning the ACC, no doubt they're in the playoff.
Yeah.
Alabama winning the SEC, no doubt they're in the playoff. Ohio State and Iowa, I'm going to put them as clump them together because whoever wins that game, if Iowa beats Ohio State, are you putting Iowa in the playoff? Because I'm putting them in the playoff because they'd be undefeated. An undefeated Big Ten champion, whether it's Ohio State or Iowa, is getting in the playoff. The question becomes Stanford and Utah. We don't have to worry about them because they're 2 lost teams, so throw them out. Notre Dame's better. However, if we have an undefeated champion, right now that would be Oklahoma State, an undefeated champion from the Big 12, do you not see, if you're on the committee, do you not say, okay, they're undefeated and they have a conference title because they won the Big 12 outright, they're ahead of Notre Dame? Or do you say that Notre Dame has played better opponents, no conference championship, a 1-loss team is in the playoff over an undefeated?
Yeah. That's what I would do. I would have Notre Dame in the playoffs.
Over an undefeated Oklahoma State team.
A weak undefeated Oklahoma State team. Oklahoma State is not that good.
But they would have had a conference title.
I don't give a rat's ass.
Would have a conference title.
That good. They are not that good.
Notre Dame, in order to make the playoffs, to me, needs 2 things to happen. The first one, they can control. The first one is simple. They need to win out. They need to win out. They lose 1 game, they're done. They can kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. The second thing they need to happen is they need either Baylor this week or Oklahoma next week to win.
And I guarantee you, one of those 2 teams will win.
Here's another question I'm going to throw your way about the Big 12. There's a situation where and this has a lot to happen, but let's say Baylor loses this week, wins next week. So they lose against Oklahoma State, beats TCU.
So then they've had 2 losses.
Two losses. Oklahoma State wins this week, loses to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma wins out. If that happens, Oklahoma State would have 1 loss, but Oklahoma would be the tiebreak winner over them. Oklahoma could win the Big 10 or the Big 12 title. If something like that happened and we're sitting there saying a 1-loss team won the Big 12, fine, put Notre Dame in. They've played better opponents because look at what the Big 12 is. However, I'm sitting here looking and if Oklahoma wins the Big 12 with 1 loss, put Notre Dame in. They've played better opponents. If Oklahoma State wins as undefeated, put them in. They're an undefeated team. They would be one of two undefeated teams. It'd be whoever comes out. Right now, it'd be whoever comes out of the Big Ten and Oklahoma State. They've got to go in there. Maybe not 1-2. They don't have to be 1-2 because they're undefeated, but they would have won the Big 12 as an undefeated, put them in.
No. I'm not going to agree with you on this point, Ricky. They're a weak, undefeated team.
You can stop the Danny boys. I know you're an Irish fan.
They're a weak.
But if they go undefeated,
that's like people would say if Ohio State goes undefeated, they should not be in the playoff. Who cares? They went undefeated. They're not a good undefeated team. That's what people would argue. I think that's what you would argue. You bitched about them all season long. Oh, why are they number one? Well,
they're not number one anymore.
They're undefeated,
I got my wish.
They're not exactly. But so when things happened when playoff rankings finally came out, they weren't number one because they weren't the best team. They put them down to what, 3? They're a weak, undefeated team. And I am not done yet. So I just want to cut you off for 1 second. I want to correct myself. Is not a good undefeated team, and Notre Dame with 1 loss is stronger than they are with 0 losses.
So you would say, I'm just going to pull up their schedule, but the one correction I wanted to make is Ohio State and Iowa wouldn't be the other undefeated. Clemson, I'm sorry, I forgot about you. You guys are still undefeated. If you won out, you would be one of 3 undefeated teams. Here's the big wins for Oklahoma State. They beat number 8 TCU, and if they win out, they would have beaten a ranked Baylor team and a ranked Oklahoma team. That's 3 wins. Notre Dame has, at the time, and this is going to get to another thing in a second, but at the time, a 14th ranked Georgia Tech team.
I think I already went over this, but I'd love to hear you say it.
Then they lost to Clemson.
Close, 2 points.
Beat a ranked Temple team. However, Brandon, they're a group of 5 team. Should they not have been taken seriously because they're a group of 5 team? And then they'll have to beat a ranked number 7 Stanford team.
And remember, they played also a USC team
but they weren't ranked.
Who was competitive at the time.
I was only looking at ranked opponents. I mean, you could throw in and say that Texas Tech, say won by 70, but Texas Tech is nowhere near USC. Here's the thing, another thing I want to throw in here and ask your opinion on. And it comes with Notre Dame with that Georgia Tech win. At the time when they beat the Yellow Jackets were 2-1 after that game, 14th in the country. I saw an article on ESPN today that was talking about how a win and loss record changes because of what the team does that season. Do you think it should be affected that number 14 win over Georgia Tech has a little grain of salt next to it because Georgia Tech is 3-7 this year and 1-6? Should that win still be so strong because it was the number 14 team in the country? Or should they look at it and go, you know what, Georgia Tech's not that good this season, so we're probably going to lessen that win a little bit. It was good at the time, but Georgia Tech's not a Clemson, not a Oklahoma kind of win. What do you think?
Well, yeah, because, I even said it. I mean, at the time, they were 14. Obviously, they didn't end up having a good season, but at the time, they were good. I mean, they had a rushing attack that a lot of people were scared of. People were talking about it. They talked about it on College Game Day. This is a rushing attack that, could really do some damage. Notre Dame held it down enough where they were able to get the win, and it was a good win. So I think that people still have to look at it and go, you know what? Doesn't matter. At the time, it was a good win. I mean, it's not like you beat Alabama and Alabama is going to be, 10-0 or whatever, but it's still a quality win on the schedule. And you look back at it, and guess what? It would be a really bad loss if they had lost it. But since they won, it's a good win.
You know what I think happens? If Oklahoma State goes undefeated, if they go undefeated, what's going to happen is I feel like the committee will put an undefeated OK State team into the playoff, and Notre Dame will be left out if the three ahead of them, the Big Ten champion, the Alabama and Clemson, win out because they'll all stay in the playoff. You know what I think it will force Notre Dame to say to itself? We want to make the playoff? Fuck it, let's all go in. We're just going to join the ACC. We already got our toe in the water. Why not jump in? And that's the one thing with Notre Dame that I just never understood was if you're going to join a conference, join a fucking conference. Don't pussyfoot around and go, well, you know what? I want to play half of your teams, but I still want to play the other teams. Notre Dame, this should be your... If you want to join the ACC, go ahead and join the ACC. Then in your other 4 non-conference games, if you want to play Stanford, you can play Stanford. You want to play USC, you can play USC. Hell, if you want to even bring back the Michigan game, you could bring back the Michigan game, and then gives you one more, I don't know, FCS opponent you can play, or like a Texas or a team that no one cares about from like the Sun Belt to play as your opening game to get ready, but don't let Appalachian State fool you. They're here to play. I just feel like Notre Dame either join the ACC or don't join the ACC. What do you think?
They're going to have to join somebody eventually.
Yeah, because it's going to keep, especially if it keeps keeping them out of this college football playoff.
They're going to have to do it eventually, and it's going to be sooner or later because that's just what people are going to. They're in conferences. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe it's not exactly what they want to do because I think they probably enjoy being, they do have the perks of being independent, but at the same time, they would probably enjoy more perks and get more respect if they were inside a conference. I'm still going to be with my stance of Notre Dame. I still think is better than Oklahoma State. I'm interested to see what the rankings are when they come out tonight. I hope Oklahoma State is nowhere near that top 5. Fuck them.
They were number 6 in ours.
I don't even remember what I put them at.
They were in ours. We had our bottom 2 out were at number 6, OK State, Ohio State at number 5.
Put them at 7.
And then we had our top 4 from bottom to top was, I want to say, Iowa, Notre Dame at 3, Clemson, Alabama.
My top 4 were Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, or as I spelled it, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. With Iowa on the outside.
The only thing me and you disagreed about this week was you had Notre Dame at 3. What, you had them at 4?
3. I had them at 3.
You had them at 3. I had them at 4. And then you had OSU at 3. Iowa at 5.
I had Ohio State at 4. Oh, OSU.
Yeah, that's Ohio State.
Yeah, but you 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I had Iowa.
Or it could be Oklahoma State.
OK State. But I had the Buckeyes out, Iowa in. That's why Iowa. The crazy thing about our rankings, guess how many points separated Iowa and the Buckeyes? 1. 1 point put Iowa into our playoff. That's just little disagreement from me and Brandon. You guys can check out that video on our YouTube channel. But we got to talk about the Big Ten before we wrap up shop here. The only conference we haven't talked about, because we kind of talked about the Big 12 when we mentioned Notre Dame. As of right now, here's how it stands. Iowa, they've got 2 games left. Purdue and at Nebraska.
Purdue only lost by 7 to Northwestern.
Win or lose. Iowa's going to the Big Ten title game. If they go 10-2, if Wisconsin goes 10-2, Iowa owns the tiebreaker for beating Wisconsin earlier this season. So Hawkeyes are in Indy. However, the East gets a little bit tricky because the Buckeyes have 2 games left. Those games happen to be against Michigan State and Michigan. As of right now, recording this podcast, we've got about 20 minutes until those rankings come out, but as of right now, 13 and 14, Michigan State and Michigan. Michigan State has Ohio State, like I mentioned, and Penn State. Michigan has Penn State, OSU. So both the Michigan teams are playing OSU and Penn State. Ohio State plays both of them. If Ohio State wins out, they go to the ship. However, if Michigan State wins, they go to the Big Ten title game. And if both OSU and, well, you know what, Michigan's out. Michigan's out. So it's either Michigan State or Ohio State. Winner of this game this week goes to the Big Ten title game.
Yeah,
this is the semifinal for the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited. I think that we're going to have ourselves a pretty good game this week, especially with Michigan State, Ohio State. And depending on what Ohio State does in these next 2 weeks, we may see ourselves with a big shakeup in the top four. Big shakeup.
You know what would be an even bigger shakeup? Ohio State wins against Michigan State, loses to Michigan the way that I drew it up a few weeks ago. They would still win the East because they would own the tiebreaker over Michigan State, and they'd still have one win over Michigan. They'd still get to play Iowa. If Ohio State wins the Big Ten as a one-loss team, then you could say, hey, you know what? If depending on what Oklahoma State does, let's say OK State goes undefeated, then we're having the argument, who gets in, the Buckeyes or the Irish? Who's that fourth team? Buckeyes or Irish? One-loss teams.
Irish. That's easy for me. That's easy for me because I don't think the Buckeyes have had as tough of a schedule.
Here's what I think. There's only one reason why I would think about putting the Buckeyes in over the Irish in that situation. And you roll your eyes, but it's one of the things the committee looks at, and this is a question to the greater population of should this actually matter. Ohio State would have a conference championship. Should that, and that's a bigger question. Should that even be looked at? How much do you weigh the conferences? And the only reason we're looking at this is BYU nowhere near the top four. Army nowhere near the top four. Notre Dame, they're an independent. They don't have a conference.
Well, I think that, and we talked about this before already, and I really don't want to talk about it a whole lot anymore.
I just wanted to throw that situation out there.
The committee looks at the two teams, Ohio State and Notre Dame, in this scenario that we're talking about, nothing can be done. Nothing can be done about that. You know, for next year, maybe, but you can't knock a team. If you looked at Ohio State and they won their conference championship, then you looked at Oklahoma State, they lost their conference championship. And you're looking to try and compare those two teams. Then we have something. Then it's, okay, Ohio State, they won, Oklahoma State lost, easy. It's not easy when you put Ohio State, a team that won theirs, to Notre Dame, a team that there's nothing to win.
You know what I think they should do? They should take a page out of the book from college basketball. And I knew I was going to get to throw my college basketball in here somewhere, Brandon. And here it is. Come tournament time, what's the one thing ESPN loves to do? What's the one thing I love to do, even when it's not tournament time and I'm just giving you two quarterbacks and I want you to pick the best one? What's that called? A blind what? Starts with an R. You usually give these out for job interviews. Your resume? You're looking at me with a blank face.
Yeah, I know. Don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
The blind resumes where they have, for college tournament time, they're talking about two teams. And they've got Team A, and they give you all these stats, like here's their win-loss, here's their big wins, here's their big losses. Team 2, here's their record, here's their big wins, here's their big losses.
I don't know what you mean with blind resume, though.
Because you don't know.
They're giving out the resume. You're giving out
2 teams. Yeah, the resume, but you don't know whose resume it is. It's just Team A and Team B. Then they talk about it. Oh, well, if it was out of these 2 teams, I'd pick this team because of their team win. Then after they talk about it, they reveal, oh, this was Illinois' schedule and this was Utah's schedule. That's what I think college football needs. Instead of this, and the only reason I am backing the college conference championship thing is because that's what the playoff is looking at, and that's what I know they're going to. One of the things they're going to look at.
They also need to look at going to 8 teams.
However, they should just take a page out of the basketball books. Okay, Florida and Oklahoma State are both 1-loss teams. Here's Team A, here's Team B. Which team would you pick? Looking at the resume. Most people would then back Brandon. But if you're a person that's like, hey, but Ricky, what if Oklahoma State had that conference title game? Or not title game, but they won their conference outright, had the championship. Does that weigh them ahead of it? Notice how basketball doesn't do that. But one last question I want to ask you about the Big Ten, because we got to get back to them. Yeah, I know. I'm kind of squinting with my eye there.
Squinting with one eye closed. I'm not sure why.
How do you see the rest of the Big Ten season playing out? That's one. Who plays Iowa in the Big Ten title game?
Well, it comes down to
it's either going to be Ohio State or Michigan State. Who wins this weekend to go?
Yeah, because Iowa is set. They're going to end up 12-0.
Even if they lost, they own the tiebreaker over the Badgers. The Badgers. No, the Badgers.
They're not going to lose.
I don't know. That Purdue, they only lost by 7 to Northwestern.
But Ohio State is going to have one heck of a game this weekend against Michigan State. However, Michigan State, Connor Cook, what's the status on Cook? He said he'll be ready to go for Ohio State, but how healthy will he be? Will he be 100%? A couple weeks back, I would have said Michigan State wins this game pretty easily. Today, I've done the complete turnaround, and Ohio State will win this weekend.
Hey, we're in agreement.
And Ohio State will play Iowa in that final game.
We're in agreement.
That's what I'm saying.
We're in agreement because my situation, I'm staying right down pat to what I said weeks ago. Ohio State wins this weekend against Michigan State, loses in Ann Arbor. If that still happens today, Michigan doesn't get in, Michigan State doesn't get in, Ohio State still gets in. Ohio State, Iowa, who wins that game?
Iowa.
You think Iowa wins that game?
I do.
I would love that.
I've got some confidence in Iowa.
Do you think that, and this is the question I was leading to, the ultimate question, what's better for the Big Ten? A repeat champion going back to the playoff? Or a team like Iowa, this is the first time they've been 10-0 to go undefeated and go to the playoff?
In my opinion, it's Iowa.
What's better for the Big Ten?
In my opinion, it's Iowa winning and being able to go to the playoff. Why? Because it shows so many people, I think, have said for so long, I've been one of them, the Big Ten has so much trash at the bottom and little jewels at the top. It's starting to get where we've got some more parity, and some people love parity, some people hate it, and some people are in between. I'm starting to like it. I especially like to see when you got some other teams step up and show the rest of college football that this is a good-ass conference. Mm-hmm. We are good. The Big Ten isn't a joke. The Big Ten is not Michigan State and Ohio State. The Big Ten is Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa. Illinois is going to come around. Northwestern has come around. Iowa, in the end, my answer to that is Iowa winning to show that It's not just the top teams at the very top.
Can I take what you said and take it deeper into the heart of the Big Ten? Do you mind if I do that?
You're the Big Ten guy. Go ahead with your monologue.
The reason why I think that Iowa needs to win the Big Ten and why it would be better is to show not just what you said, but more so that the West isn't a joke. When you look at the Big Ten West, Wisconsin, it used to be Wisconsin. Who's going to play Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game? Now you've got Iowa. Wisconsin's a one-loss team. Northwestern's doing well this year. Nebraska, Illinois. Nebraska kind of took a fall back. Illinois has been doing better since they fired that trash, which was Tim Beckman. Minnesota under Jerry Kill had been great. Purdue's still a bottom feeder, but it takes the West and says, hey,
did you say Indiana?
What?
Did you mention Indiana?
Indiana's in the East.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. Sorry, you're talking about the West.
It takes the West and says, hey, you know what? We're here too. It's not just the East of Ohio State, the Michigans, and Penn State. Look at Indiana. I said this in our ranking video. Indiana's 4-6 right now. Lost in double overtime against Michigan. 1 touchdown game against Iowa, they lost by. 2 points to Rutgers. And by a touchdown to Ohio State. They win those games, they're an 8-6 team. The only 2 teams in the conference that blew them out, Michigan State 52-26 and Penn State 29-7. That's it. This is a team that won all. I mean, their non-conference schedule of Southern Illinois, Florida Atlantic, Western Kentucky, and Wake Forest is trash. But it's where they are. But back to my statement of Iowa needs to win the Big Ten to show that the Big Ten is more than just the Big Ten beasts, as I'm going to call them. We also have the West there to challenge the beast. But before we sign off, anything we missed today, Brandon? Anybody we did not talk about in this college football playoff discussion?
No, I'm happy with what we got.
I got one. I forgot him.
Okay.
And this is just a simple question. I know you're going to hate me for doing this.
Probably.
If Houston goes undefeated, how much grain of salt should they have in the playoff discussion go?
0.
None whatsoever.
Nope.
I'll give you this. If they win the group of 5, who should they play? Which New Year's Six bowl should they play in? Can I get that out of you? Because if they win the group of 5, they're guaranteed a New Year's Six bowl. So is it going to be the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl?
They can play in the blue fucking bowl. I don't care.
Not going to give them anything?
I don't
care. The Fiesta Bowl?
No one cares. No one cares.
We actually had a tweet about that. Did you see that this week?
No.
One of our followers, I want to say it was Johnny, said that, Brandon must be happy that Memphis lost. And I said back to him, like, no. If anything, Brandon wanted Memphis to win so Houston gets their first loss, and then we can stop talking about the group of 5.
I mean, in the thing, here's the thing, and for people who think that I really don't care, they're almost right. But I don't hate the group of 5. I don't think that they're worthless to college football.
They're just
they're
just not as elite as the Power 5s.
Here's the thing, though, is at the end of the day, fans they are what keep anything going. Group of 5 have fans. Lots of them. But when you're growing up, most likely, who are you watching? Who's on TV?
Group
Notre
of 5's
Dame.
not on TV unless it's like a Tuesday night.
I mean, Notre Dame, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Florida State, all of these Power 5s. That's who people want to see play. A generalization, I get it. But that's who most of the country wants to see play.
They want to see the SECs, the Pac-12s, the Big 10s, the Big 12s, the ACC.
They do. And will one day we get away from that? Maybe. But until those teams in the middle, not at the bottom, in the middle, the Houston, the Memphis, all those, until they really climb it up towards the top, they're not going to get that recognition. And how many years are they away from recognition? Probably one.
Can I ask you one follow-up question before we end?
Yeah.
You mentioned that we need an 8-team playoff.
We do.
If we go to an 8-team playoff, would you be okay with giving the Group of 5 champion, which is the best record out of all the Group of 5s, a slot in that 8-team playoff?
Without a doubt.
So if it's 8, you give them a slot.
If it's 8, yeah. Because if it's 8, you probably did enough to be the 8th, the 7th, the 8th, the 6th. You haven't done enough to be the 1 through 4. And I don't think there's going to be too many people that would disagree with that.
And that's going to be a discussion for another day, because I saw an article this weekend that said that 4 playoff teams is perfect. And me personally, I don't know where I sit anymore on that fence. Brandon, we all know where you sat because you mentioned it today, but that'll be a discussion for a different day. This is a good podcast. This is a good one. You guys can follow us on Twitter.
It was real feel good.
Well, it was until we started talking about Notre Dame and got a little bit heated. Got a little heated over that, but hey, nothing wrong when me and Brandon go for each other's necks. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Ricky Widmer. Brandon's at young_swan19. However, he's not 19. Don't forget that. You can follow Most Valuable Podcast at Most Valuable Pod. Check out me and Brandon's personal playoff rankings. We got the graphics up on our Twitter account this week at Most Valuable Podcast. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you're on YouTube, that follow and repost button if you're on SoundCloud. Let us know down in the comments what you thought of today's podcast and what do you think on some of the issues we were talking about today in the college football playoff. I want to thank you guys for checking out this podcast, and as always, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this MVP podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Most Valuable Pod for more great podcasts.